Why don't you recognize suffering? Have you ever felt that your life seems completely normal on the surface, yet somewhere deep inside, something doesn't feel quite right? It's not a clear pain, and it's not a specific problem you can point to or fix. It's just a subtle heaviness, a quiet tiredness, as if you're moving forward, but not really sure where you're going. Everything is still happening the way it's supposed to. You wake up, you work, you talk, you smile, you fulfill your responsibilities, but in a quiet moment, you suddenly realize you don't truly feel at ease. Maybe it's in the morning, right after you open your eyes. There's a faint sense of reluctance, not because anything terrible is waiting for you, but simply another day. The same routines, the same pressures, the same thoughts. You don't call it suffering, because everything is still fine, but deep down, you don't feel genuinely comfortable. Maybe it's when you're surrounded by people, a gathering, a conversation, a place full of laughter. You participate, you speak, you blend into the atmosphere, but a part of you remains still. You watch everything happening, and there's a feeling that's hard to name, as if you're there, but not fully there. A quiet sense of disconnection, so subtle that no one notices it, only you do. Or maybe it's at night, when everything quiets down, when there's no more work, nothing left to keep you busy. You pick up your phone, scroll a little, then put it down, and in that empty space, you begin to hear more clearly what's happening inside you. Not big thoughts, just small feelings, a little worry, a little emptiness, a little uncertainty, and sometimes just a soft question. Am I really okay living like this? You might say, it's just fatigue. Everyone feels this way sometimes. And that's true, but there's something worth looking at. If it's only temporary, why does it keep coming back? It's not loud, not obvious, but it's there, repeating itself, like a thin background layer beneath your life. You keep trying, you keep moving forward, you set goals, you achieve things, but there are moments when you pause and realize that even though you've come quite far, the feeling inside hasn't changed much. There's still a slight sense of lack, still something not quite enough, still something incomplete. Maybe you've never called it suffering, because you think suffering must be something big, loss, pain, major life events. What you're experiencing feels too ordinary, too subtle, too familiar. But precisely because it's familiar, you don't notice it's there every single day. And perhaps the real question isn't, is life suffering, but am I living in a state of subtle suffering without realizing it? In modern life, we're used to solving problems. If there's pressure, we try to reduce it. If there's a goal, we try to achieve it. If there's difficulty, we try to overcome it. Everything revolves around how to make things better. But rarely do we stop and ask, where does this vague heaviness inside actually come from? You go to work, you try, you complete your tasks. Sometimes you feel satisfied, but very soon after, another pressure appears, another goal, another expectation. You can't stay long in the feeling of, this is enough. There's always something ahead pushing you to keep running. You earn money, you improve your life, but along with that come new worries. Worries about maintaining your income, about the future, about things that haven't even happened yet. You may have more than before, but your sense of security doesn't increase proportionally. Sometimes, it even feels more fragile. It's the same in relationships. You want to be understood, cared for, loved, and when you have that, you begin to fear losing it. An unanswered message can make you overthink. A small change in someone's attitude can make you uneasy. You want to keep things good, but the more you try to hold on, the harder it feels to keep them. There are times when you think that if you just change your circumstances, everything will be better. A new job, a new environment, a new relationship. And yes, when things change, you feel better for a while. But after some time, the same feelings return, just in a different form. Have you noticed, many things in your life change, but the feeling inside you repeats in almost the same way? When you don't have something, you think having it will make you okay. When you have it, it still doesn't feel like enough. When you achieve one thing, you move toward another. When you solve one problem, you face a new one. And so, you remain in a constant state of trying to be okay, but rarely truly feeling okay. What's interesting is, you don't call this suffering. You call it life. you think everyone is like this. And because everyone is like this, you stop questioning it. But if you look more closely, you'll see a familiar loop. Desire, achievement, then desire again. Hope, disappointment, then hope again. A cycle with no clear endpoint. You keep going, striving, progressing, but inside, you don't feel lighter. Maybe you think you haven't tried hard enough, that you need to be better, stronger, more capable. But have you ever wondered, is the issue really that you're not enough? Or is it the way you're seeing things? There are people who are very successful, yet not at peace. People who have everything materially, yet feel empty. People who are always busy, yet when they stop, they don't even know what they truly want. This doesn't mean what you're doing is wrong. It just means, perhaps you're living within a way of seeing that you've never questioned. You think suffering only comes when things don't go your way. But if that were true, then when everything goes your way, you should be free from suffering. Yet in reality, that's not always the case. Even when things are fine, there can still be a subtle unease. So perhaps what you call suffering isn't only in big events. It may be right there in how you live each day, in how you desire, how you cling to what you have, how you react to what happens. And perhaps the reason you don't recognize suffering is because it's too familiar. It's not big enough to catch your attention, not clear enough to be named, yet it's always there, quietly, repeating every day. If you look a little deeper, you may begin to see that this feeling of something's not right. But I don't know why isn't something new. It's not unique to you. It's a very natural part of how humans experience life. We just rarely pause long enough to notice it. There's a simple way to understand this. Think of a time when you strongly wanted something. Maybe an object, an opportunity, a relationship, or an achievement. Before you had it, you thought about it a lot. You believed that once you got it, you would feel lighter, happier, more fulfilled. And when you finally did get it, yes, you felt happy. But how long did that feeling last? A day, a week, a month? Then gradually, it became normal, and you started wanting something else. It's like being very thirsty and drinking a glass of water. In that moment, it feels wonderful, but you can't hold on to that feeling forever. After a while, you're thirsty again. Drinking water isn't wrong, it's necessary. But if you expect that drinking once will mean you'll never be thirsty again, that's not realistic. And life unfolds in a very similar way, just more subtle, more complex. Your inner feelings work the same way. Joy comes and goes, satisfaction comes and goes, even peace of mind comes and goes. But the important thing is, we often behave as if these feelings can be held permanently if we just do things right. We try to hold on to joy, extend satisfaction, avoid discomfort, and in that effort, a subtle tension begins to form. You may not notice it, but every time you think, I need this to be okay, you place yourself in a state of lack. Every time you think, I must keep this so I don't lose this good feeling, you begin to create fear. And every time you think, this must not happen, you create resistance within yourself. It's like holding a handful of sand. The tighter you grip, the more it slips away. But you keep gripping, because you're afraid of losing it. And throughout that whole process, your hand remains tense. You can't truly relax. Or imagine sitting in a small boat on a flowing river. If you let the current carry you naturally, you still move, but your body doesn't need to strain. But if you try to row against the current, or force the boat to stay still while the water keeps moving, you'll become exhausted. Not because the river is wrong, but because of how you're trying to control it. Life is the same. Everything is constantly changing. Emotions, circumstances, people. But inside you, there's a very natural tendency to hold on to what feels good, to avoid what feels bad, and to want things to go your way. That tendency isn't wrong, it's human. But if you don't recognize it, it quietly creates a long-lasting fatigue. You can begin to see this more clearly in moments when things don't go your way. When a plan fails, when someone doesn't respond as you expect, when something changes unexpectedly, you feel discomfort. That's normal, but if you look closely, the discomfort doesn't only come from the situation itself, it also comes from the thought inside you. It should have been different. That should have is where things begin to feel heavier. You're not just experiencing reality, you're comparing it to how you think it should be. And the bigger the gap between what is and what you want, the more discomfort you feel. Yet you're used to blaming circumstances, other people, situations, rarely looking at that gap within yourself. This doesn't mean you shouldn't have desires. It doesn't mean you should give up goals or become indifferent to life. Not at all. It simply means, perhaps you need to see more clearly how you relate to those desires. Do you see them as something necessary for you to be okay? Or can you see them as directions, possibilities, things you can pursue, but not things that determine your inner peace? There's something very subtle here. Suffering isn't always obvious pain. Sometimes it's just a gentle, ongoing tension, a feeling that you always need to become something else than what you are right now. A state where you rarely allow yourself to simply stop and feel. This is okay. You are always becoming, but you rarely just are. And when you're always in a state of not yet, not enough, not there, then no matter how far you go, that feeling goes with you. Not because you're going the wrong way, but because you're carrying a perspective that doesn't allow you to feel enough. Perhaps at this point, you may begin to realize something important. Suffering isn't only in big events. It doesn't only appear when life goes wrong. It can exist even when everything seems fine, simply because of how you cling, resist, or desire. And what makes it so hard to recognize is that it feels completely normal. It blends into how you think, how you react, how you live every day. You don't see it as a problem, because you believe it's the only way to live. But when you begin to see this, not just as an idea, but through your own direct experience, something very gentle opens. Not to force you to change everything at once, but to allow you to start looking again, with a different kind of awareness. If you slow down a little, you can try to look at yourself, not to judge, but simply to see. No need to try to change anything right away. Just observe, honestly, gently. Have you ever noticed how many times in a normal day you feel dissatisfied? Not big things, just very small ones. A message that replies slower than you expected. A sentence from someone that doesn't match your expectations. Something not going according to plan. Very small things, but enough to make your mind slightly ripple. And each time it happens, how do you react? Do you notice that you immediately want to fix it? To make everything go back to how it should be? Do you notice your mind starts thinking more, imagining more, creating stories inside your head? Sometimes the event is already over, but you still keep it alive, replaying it in your thoughts, as if it is still happening. Try to recall a recent moment when you felt uncomfortable. It doesn't have to be something big, just enough to make you uneasy. At that moment, what made you uncomfortable the most? Was it the event itself, or the way you thought about it? If you had not added more thoughts, not attached meaning to it, would it have simply been just an event that passed much faster than you expected? Have you noticed that many things that exhaust you are not heavy by themselves, but become heavy because you hold on to them for too long? You hold on to a word, a glance, a feeling. You don't just experience it, you carry it, analyze it, repeat it, and slowly, it becomes part of your mood. Stretching from hour to hour, from day to day. Have you ever asked yourself why you do that? Is it because you want to understand more? Or because you want to protect yourself? Or because you believe that if you think enough, you can control everything? But in reality, can you actually control it? Or are you simply making yourself more tired? Look at what you are pursuing. Not to judge it as right or wrong, but just to see more clearly. You are trying very hard, and that is something to respect. But are you attaching your sense of worth to the outcome? Do you think that if you achieve it, you will become enough? And if you haven't achieved it yet, do you quietly feel like you are not enough? Do you realize that you are creating a standard, and then using that same standard to pressure yourself? Have you ever allowed yourself to stop without guilt? To stop without thinking you are falling behind? To simply rest? Or even when you rest, does your mind still not rest, still thinking, still worrying? Still calculating what comes next? Do you notice that you are always in a state of preparation? Preparing for something that might come. Preparing not to be surprised. Preparing for things to go as planned. But does life ever fully go according to plan? And when it doesn't, you have to prepare again. Could it be that your exhaustion does not come from what you are doing, but from always having to be ready for everything? Have you ever sat still, doing nothing at all, simply observing what is happening inside you, not trying to change it, not trying to control it, just watching? What do you see then? At first, there may be many thoughts jumping from one thing to another. There may be uncomfortable feelings, a bit of restlessness, a bit of emptiness, and your natural reaction is to escape, to do something so you don't have to feel it. But if you stay a little longer, you begin to see more clearly. Those thoughts are not fixed, they come and go. Those feelings are not permanent either. They are not as solid as you once believed. You are simply jumping into that flow and getting carried away. Do you notice how you identify with thoughts? When a thought appears, you believe it. When a feeling appears, you become it. You rarely stand outside to see it as something passing through. And when you cannot see it clearly, it leads you. You can try asking yourself a very simple question, right now. What am I feeling? No need to answer perfectly, just honestly. And then add another question. Will this feeling stay here forever? Just asking that, you will begin to notice a slight space, a small gap between you and your experience. You are no longer completely absorbed, and perhaps you begin to realize something important. Not everything that makes you suffer comes from the outside. Many things come from the way you hold on, the way you react, the way you do not allow things to simply be as they are. You are not wrong. You are simply used to a way of living you have never really looked at. And when you begin to see it, not rushing to change it, just seeing it, something inside starts to soften. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because you are no longer making it heavier than before. When you start seeing what is happening inside you, you may realize something quiet but important. Not every moment requires you to do something to make life less painful. Sometimes, what is needed is simply to stop at the right moment and see clearly. Not to analyze, but to see. And from that seeing, a different way of living begins to open naturally. There is a very simple practice you can begin in ordinary moments. It is returning to your breath. Nothing complicated. Just when you notice that you are tense, worried, or overthinking, you pause for a moment. Inhale slowly, knowing that you are inhaling. Exhale slowly, knowing that you are exhaling. No need to make it perfect. Just be aware that it is happening. It sounds simple, but if you truly do it, you will notice a subtle shift. When you pay attention to the breath, you step out of the constant stream of thoughts. You are no longer carried away by mental stories. You return to something real, something happening right now, and in that place, your mind begins to open a little space. Not an empty void, but a space not filled with thinking. And in that space, you begin to see more clearly. Another very simple practice is learning to recognize emotions as they arise. Instead of being carried away, you simply pause and name them. For example, when you feel anger, you don't react immediately. You simply say inwardly, I am feeling anger. When you feel worry, you recognize, I am feeling worry. It may sound very simple, but this creates an important distance. You are no longer the anger, no longer the worry. You are the one observing it. And just that small distance already reduces its intensity significantly. You don't need to force yourself to stop feeling angry. You don't need to become positive immediately. You simply do not fully become it. And when you are no longer completely absorbed, you will see that the emotion changes on its own. It is not fixed. It is not permanent. It comes and goes, if you do not hold on to it. Another practice you can try is learning to gently let go of small things. In a day, many things do not go as expected, but not everything requires a reaction. Some things, if you simply let them pass, will end very quickly on their own. For example, a word that feels unpleasant, a small action from someone that bothers you. You can choose to hold on to it and think about it, or you can let it go from the very beginning, not by forcing yourself to ignore it, but by asking, is this worth carrying? If not, you let it go, gently. No need to make it complicated. Just don't hold it anymore. You will begin to realize that much of your suffering does not come from big events, but from accumulating small things. Each one is small, but together they become a weight you don't notice. By learning to release small things, you lighten yourself day by day. Another important practice is learning to return to what is present, instead of always reaching for what is missing. This does not mean you stop dreaming or striving. It simply means that while you are moving forward, you can still pause and see that there are things in the present moment that are already enough to soften you. It could be a simple meal, a quiet moment, someone sitting beside you, a breath that is not rushed. Very small, ordinary things, but if you truly pause and feel them, you will see they are not insignificant. The problem is, you often overlook them, you treat them as normal, and you only focus on what is missing. That is what keeps you in a constant state of not enough. You don't need to change your entire life to suffer less. You only need to change the way you are present in it. A little less rushing, a little less grasping, a little less resisting. You still work, still live, still love, but inside, you are no longer as tense as before. At first, these practices may not feel easy. You will forget, you will get carried away again. That is completely natural. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to remember and return. Each time you return, you are building a new habit, a new way of living. Not a completely different life, but a slightly clearer, slightly lighter way of being. And gradually, you will notice something clearly. Life outside may still be the same, but your experience of it has changed. You are no longer pulled away so far. You no longer hold on so tightly. You no longer try so hard to be okay. You begin to notice there are very ordinary moments, yet they feel light, and it is in those moments that you are no longer suffering as before. And then, there may come a moment when you no longer try to understand more. No longer try to fix yourself into something better, something more correct. It is just a very light moment where you suddenly realize how tired you have been from constantly trying to become something other than yourself. You have tried so hard already, tried to be more stable, tried to not be wrong, tried to be accepted, tried to keep everything under control. But the more you try, the more tense you become, the more you hold on, the more exhausted you feel. And there are moments when you no longer even know what you are trying for. You only know that if you stop, you feel uneasy. Then, in some quiet moment, you loosen your grip, not giving up on life, not abandoning everything, just not tightening anymore. You let a thought pass without holding on to it. Let a feeling arise without resisting it. Let an unwanted situation happen without rushing to react. Right in that moment, a kind of lightness appears. Very subtle, but real. You begin to realize that you were not tired because life was too heavy, but because you were constantly straining to carry it in an unnecessary way. You had been making everything heavier through holding on too long, thinking too much, reacting too quickly. You begin to see more clearly that you don't need everything to be perfect in order to feel at peace. You don't need to control everything in order to feel safe. You don't need to constantly become a better version of yourself in order to have value. There are things that, when you stop gripping them, become softer on their own. It is like when you stop forcing yourself to be happy, you actually feel lighter. When you stop forcing others to understand you, you find relationships becoming easier to breathe in. When you stop forcing life to follow your will, you notice your inner tension softening. These changes are not dramatic, but they are enough for you to feel a clear difference. You begin to understand something very simple. Holding on tightly does not guarantee keeping things. And letting go does not necessarily mean losing them. There are things that only when released, you are no longer hurt by them. And this letting go is not indifference. It is simply no longer clinging through fear. At that point, you don't need to tell anyone that you have understood something. You don't need to prove that you are living differently. Inside, there is just a quiet shift, a kind of quiet that does not come from everything outside being perfect, but from you no longer making everything feel so heavy. You still live the same life, still the same work, still the same relationships, but the way you show up is different. You are no longer rushing too much, worrying too far ahead, or holding on for too long. You begin to know when to pause, when to breathe, when to loosen your grip. And maybe, for the first time in a long while, you feel that you don't need to go anywhere else to become better. You only need to be here, and stop making things heavier than they are. That alone is already a profound change you may never have considered before. Life may still have difficult moments, still have days that don't go as planned, but you are no longer afraid of them the way you used to be. Because you begin to see that what exhausts you most is not the situation itself, but how you react to it. And when that way of reacting changes, everything else naturally shifts with it. Not loudly, not suddenly, just lighter, more enough, and in that lightness, you begin to clearly see that what you have been searching for has never left you. You simply had not paused long enough to notice it. Perhaps by now, you begin to see something very simple but very deep. You do not fail to recognize suffering because life has no suffering. You fail to recognize it because you have become so used to it that you no longer name it. It slips into your thoughts, your reactions, your small daily desires, and becomes part of what you consider normal. You think suffering must be something big, loss, breakdown, major life events, but in truth, most suffering lies in very small things. A slight dissatisfaction, a small unmet expectation, a bit of worry about what has not yet happened. These small bits, repeated long enough, form a silent background that keeps you tired without you knowing why. You do not recognize suffering because you are busy trying to escape it. That may sound strange, but it is very real. You are always reaching outward for something to change your inner feeling, a new goal, a new pleasure, a new distraction, and in doing so, you rarely look at the way you are actually creating that very suffering. You think that if things become better, you will feel lighter, but if the way you see and respond does not change, then even when life changes, the same feeling returns. You may change jobs, environments, even the people around you, but if you keep the same grasping, the same worrying, the same wanting, the same loop continues. There are moments when you pause and ask yourself, why have I tried so hard, yet still don't feel okay? And perhaps the answer is not that you have not tried enough, but that you are trying in a way that exhausts you. You are moving forward while carrying too much unnecessary weight. You carry expectations, you carry fear, you carry things from the past that you have not let go of. And when you carry too much, every step becomes heavy. There is something worth reflecting on. If you do not recognize that you are suffering, you will continue living in ways that produce suffering without knowing it. Not because you are weak, but because you have not yet seen clearly. But the moment you begin to see, even a little, the shift is already happening. Not in the outside world, but in how you respond. You stop grabbing so quickly what you like, and stop pushing away what you dislike so forcefully. A small pause appears, and in that pause, you become lighter. There are questions that, if you sit with them honestly, may make you stop for a moment. Are you living without really living? Are you happy, yet still feeling something missing? Are you trying so hard, yet still tired inside? Are you searching for something, without even knowing what it is? And if at some point you are truly honest with yourself, you may realize something very simple. What you are looking for is not ahead of you. It is right here, in the way you are living this very moment. When you stop rushing, you see more clearly. When you stop clinging, you feel lighter. When you stop forcing life to obey you, you feel less tired. Not because life becomes easier, but because you are no longer making it heavier. There is something important to remember. You do not suffer because of life. You suffer because of how you hold on to life. And once you see this, no one needs to force you to let go. You naturally begin to release what is unnecessary. And that letting go is not abandonment. It is simply no longer holding on through fear. No longer trying to keep everything tightly in your hands, but allowing things to come and go in their own way. Then you still live, still work, still love, but inside, there is a very different kind of lightness. You may not even be able to name it, but you will feel it. A sense of not being so tense anymore. A sense of not having to try so hard to be okay. A sense of being enough, and quietly at peace. And perhaps, just that alone, is already a very big change. There is a very simple sentence you can carry with you after this. You do not need more things to end suffering. You only need to see clearly what is creating it. When you see, you naturally know how to become lighter. If these words touch something in you, you don't need to do anything big. Just sit with yourself for a while. No phone, no rushing. Just breathe a little slower, and observe what is happening inside. At first it may feel unfamiliar, but if you stay with it patiently, you will begin to notice what you have never noticed before. You might also try writing one very honest line, right now. What am I feeling? It does not need to be beautiful or correct, just true. And if you wish, you can leave that line in the comments. Perhaps your honesty will touch someone else and help them see something in themselves too. If you find these reflections meaningful, you may share them with someone who needs a pause in their life. Not to convince them, not to change them, but simply as a gentle reminder that they are not alone, and that there is always a lighter way of living they can explore. And if you want a place to return to whenever your heart feels heavy, you can subscribe to the channel, not to consume more, but to remind yourself to pause, to breathe, to come back inward each time life becomes too noisy. That small reminder, over time, can become a very deep change. If you feel the value in this, you may also spread it in your own way. Nothing grand is needed, even a small share can help. Let the Dharma of the Tathagata spread, and the light of wisdom continue to grow and endure. And after all of this, what you have been looking for has never left you. It is right here, in this breath, in this moment, in the quiet recognition you are now beginning to see. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.